Millionaire Oliver Hastings invited his obese secretary Eleanor Finch to the Christmas party, but no one believed when. Why did a simple Christmas invitation from millionaire Oliver Hastings to his plus-size secretary Eleanor Finch leave everyone speechless by the end of the night? Before we continue, tell us in the comments where in the world you're watching the video from. And don't forget to subscribe. Oliver Hastings stood in the grand foyer of his opulent mansion, the soft glow of the chandelier illuminating the intricate details of the marble flooring beneath his polished shoes. The scent of pine and cinnamon wafted through the air, a fragrant reminder of the Christmas season that surrounded him. Yet, despite the splendor that enveloped him, a heavy emptiness weighed on his heart. This was the annual Christmas dinner he had meticulously planned, a tradition that he had upheld for years, yet this year felt different. The laughter and chatter of the elite social circle he belonged to felt hollow, mere echoes in a vast, echoing chamber of wealth and privilege. Each carefully curated detail, the golden place settings, the elaborate floral arrangements, the exquisite feast prepared by a renowned chef, bore witness to his success. But Oliver, a successful businessman, millionaire, and master of the art of solitude, felt trapped in a gilded cage. The walls of his mansion, adorned with priceless art and luxurious furnishings, felt as if they were closing in on him. He had built an empire, yet the loneliness that accompanied his success was insurmountable. He had everything one could desire, yet he lacked the warmth of genuine connection. As he stood at the foot of the grand staircase, Oliver's mind drifted to the faces of the guests he would soon entertain. They were all familiar, members of the elite who had circled his life like moths to a flame, drawn to his wealth and status. Yet, their laughter was often accompanied by whispers of judgment, their smiles often masked with false pretenses. They thrived on appearances, on the glossy reflections of their own lives, and Oliver had long grown weary of the charade. This year, he contemplated breaking from tradition, making a choice that would surprise not only his guests but himself as well. He turned away from the staircase, a sudden determination igniting within him. He reached for his phone, scrolling through contacts until he found a name that stood out: Eleanor Finch. It had been a chance encounter at a charity event months ago, where he had witnessed her kindness, her laughter, and her ability to connect with people in a way that felt genuine. Eleanor was unlike the others. She possessed a warmth that transcended the superficiality of his world. She was plus-sized, yes, but that singular characteristic did not define her. Unlike many in his circle, Eleanor seemed to embrace her authenticity, something he found refreshing amidst the facade that surrounded him. With a deep breath, he typed out a message, inviting her to his Christmas dinner. He hesitated for a moment, wondering how this invitation would be received. Would she see the invitation as a gesture of goodwill or as a condescending act from someone of his status? He hit send, the decision made, and immediately felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. This was the first step toward breaking free from the chains of his own making. Meanwhile, across town, Eleanor Finch sat on her modest couch, a soft blanket draped over her lap. The small apartment was decorated simply, adorned with a few festive touches that brought the spirit of Christmas into her home. As she absent-mindedly sipped her hot cocoa, she scrolled through her phone, her heart sinking with each passing moment of solitude. The holiday season had always been a bittersweet time for her, a reminder of the joy and warmth that seemed perpetually out of reach. The laughter of families and friends filled the air around her, but her own home felt eerily quiet. When her phone buzzed with a notification, she nearly dropped her mug in surprise. A message from Oliver Hastings? Her heart raced with disbelief. Why would someone like him reach out to her? She had only met him once, and the memory of their brief conversation lingered in her mind. He had been kind, attentive, a stark contrast to the world she was accustomed to. She read the invitation, the words swirling in her mind. "I would be honored if you would join me for my Christmas dinner." Skepticism washed over her. Part of her wanted to decline, to convince herself that this was just a pity invitation, a whimsical decision made in a moment of self-indulgence by a man of great wealth. But another part of her, a part that yearned for connection, felt compelled to accept. Perhaps it was the chance to escape the loneliness that had become her constant companion. Perhaps it was the opportunity to experience something outside her norm. With a deep breath, she typed a response, accepting the invitation, and sent it, a flutter of hope igniting within her. As the days passed, Eleanor found herself caught in a whirlwind of emotions: anticipation, anxiety, excitement. The evening of the dinner arrived, and she stood before her mirror, scrutinizing her reflection. She chose a dress that flattered her figure, a deep emerald green that shimmered in the light. She styled her hair with care, allowing it to cascade down her shoulders in soft waves. As she applied her makeup, she reminded herself that it was not about impressing anyone, but about embracing her own beauty and worth. This was a chance to step into a world she had only observed from the sidelines. With a mix of nerves and determination, Eleanor arrived at Oliver's mansion, the grandeur of the estate taking her breath away. It was a palace of opulence, adorned with twinkling lights and festive decorations, a stark contrast to her own humble home. As she stepped inside, the warmth enveloped her, but the moment also felt stifling. The guests milling about were all strikingly glamorous, their laughter echoing off the high ceilings, a chorus of thin and polished figures that felt alien to her. Eleanor could feel the weight of their gazes upon her, whispers swirling like a winter breeze, their eyes scrutinizing her presence. She felt out of place, like a lone star among a constellation of diamonds, each guest embodying the ideals of beauty and success that society celebrated. Yet, in that moment of uncertainty, she spotted Oliver across the room, his presence a beacon of reassurance. He stood amidst his guests, a gentleman in every sense, exuding an air of confidence that drew others to him. As she approached, she could sense the tension in the air. The laughter dimmed slightly, whispers turned to glances, and Eleanor felt exposed under their scrutiny. Oliver, however, noticed her arrival instantly, his expression shifting to one of genuine warmth. He navigated through the sea of guests, a protective force as he made his way to her side. The moment he reached her, the world around them faded into a blur. Oliver greeted her with an openness that contrasted sharply with the judgmental stares of his friends. He introduced her to a few guests, but their reactions were far from welcoming. Whispers erupted, and Eleanor could feel the condescension laced in their tones. They questioned Oliver's judgment, their expressions suggesting disbelief that he would invite someone like her to his home. But Oliver stood firm, his demeanor unyielding in the face of their prejudice. He defended her presence, insisting that this was a night for authenticity, for connection, for breaking free from the superficiality that had dominated their lives for too long. In that moment, Eleanor felt a rush of gratitude. Oliver's defense ignited a flicker of courage within her, a realization that perhaps she was worthy of this space, of being seen, of being valued for who she was beneath the surface. Yet, as the tension in the room thickened, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was standing at the precipice of something profound, something that could either shatter her or set her free. The night had only just begun, but she sensed that the choices made here would ripple far beyond the walls of Oliver's mansion, into the depths of their shared loneliness and the promise of acceptance. The air in Oliver Hastings' grand dining room was thick with a blend of laughter and muted whispers, the kind that wrapped around each guest like a silken ribbon, binding them to an unspoken agreement about the evening's decorum. The long, exquisitely set table gleamed under the golden chandeliers, laden with an extravagant feast that showcased the abundance of the season. Yet, amidst the splendor, Eleanor Finch felt like an outsider, her presence an anomaly among the meticulously curated crowd of slender figures draped in designer finery. As the first course was served, Eleanor sat at the table's edge, her heart racing with a cocktail of anxiety and anticipation. She could feel the weight of the scrutinizing gazes upon her, the delicate clinking of silverware punctuating the palpable tension. Clad in a deep emerald green dress that hugged her curves, Eleanor had chosen the garment with care, hoping it would provide a shield against the judgment she anticipated. But as she glanced around the table, catching snippets of conversation laced with thinly veiled disdain, she couldn't help but feel the gnawing sense of inadequacy creep in. Across from her, Oliver Hastings exuded a quiet confidence, his presence commanding yet warm. He had chosen to invite Eleanor for reasons that transcended the superficialities of wealth and social standing, a decision that both intrigued and alarmed his circle of elite acquaintances. As the dinner progressed, he made it a point to engage Eleanor, his genuine curiosity evident in the way he leaned in slightly, his eyes alight with interest. He asked her about her life, her passions, and her experiences, and in those moments, Eleanor felt a flicker of warmth amidst the chill of the lavish setting. With each passing course, Eleanor began to relax, her initial discomfort softening under the glow of Oliver's attention. She shared stories of her childhood, her aspirations, and the struggles she faced in a world that often dismissed her based on appearances. Oliver listened intently, nodding and smiling with encouragement, his demeanor a stark contrast to the hushed snickers and sideways glances from the other guests. In the sanctuary of their conversation, Eleanor found herself laughing, the sound surprisingly rich and carefree, as if the weight of the world had momentarily lifted. However, the reprieve was fleeting. As Eleanor detailed a particularly humorous mishap from her past, she caught fragments of conversation from the other end of the table, a pair of women whispering behind their hands, their eyes darting in her direction. The words desperate, pathetic, and embarrassing floated through the air, sharp and cutting, each syllable a reminder of the societal expectations that loomed over her like a dark cloud. The laughter in her chest faltered, replaced by a familiar pang of self-doubt. A moment of silence fell upon her, the joy she had felt moments before now teetering on the brink of despair. Oliver, sensing the shift in her mood, interjected with a story of his own, one that revealed his own vulnerabilities. As he spoke, Eleanor noticed how the atmosphere around them seemed to shift. His openness disarmed the tension that had enveloped the table. The laughter that followed was genuine, a ripple of warmth spreading through the room, though it lacked the authenticity that characterized their shared moments. Yet, the whispers continued. Behind the facade of pleasantries, Eleanor could see the true colors of Oliver's elite social circle beginning to surface. One guest, a tall woman with impeccably styled hair and a voice dripping with condescension, leaned closer to her companion, her words just loud enough for Eleanor to overhear. "Can you imagine? He must be having a midlife crisis to invite someone like her." The comment was laced with a venomous glee, as though the woman relished in the opportunity to belittle another. Eleanor's heart sank further, the laughter around her fading into a distant hum. Doubt gnawed at her, a relentless whisper questioning her worthiness of being in such esteemed company. She looked at Oliver, who remained blissfully unaware of the undercurrents of disdain swirling around them. His focus was solely on her, and for a moment, she wished she could remain in that bubble of connection, shielded from the harsh realities of their world. As the evening wore on, Eleanor's resolve began to waver. The warmth of Oliver's attention was countered by the icy reception from the others. Each laugh she shared with him felt tainted by the echoes of judgment that lingered in the air. She found herself retreating inward, struggling to reconcile the kindness she experienced with the cruel reality of the perceptions surrounding her. When the dinner reached the main course, the atmosphere shifted again, the laughter growing louder as the guests began to indulge in the wine. Eleanor, feeling overwhelmed, excused herself for a moment, needing to escape the suffocating confines of the dining room. She stepped outside onto the balcony, the cool night air enveloping her like a balm. The vastness of the night sky stretched out above her, a canvas of stars twinkling in the darkness, providing a stark contrast to the opulence within the mansion. Eleanor leaned against the railing, taking deep breaths as she tried to steady her racing heart. The chill of the evening air was invigorating, grounding her in the moment. She closed her eyes, allowing herself to feel the weight of the evening's emotions, the joy, the laughter, and the biting sting of judgment. It was a turbulent mix, and she needed to sort through it all. Suddenly, she felt a presence beside her. Oliver had followed her outside, his expression a mix of concern and understanding. He stood close but respectful, allowing her the space she needed. The moonlight illuminated his features, casting a soft glow that made him appear almost ethereal. In the quiet of the night, They shared a moment of silence, the weight of unspoken words hanging between them. Eleanor turned to face him, her vulnerability laid bare. She could see the empathy in his eyes, a reflection of the understanding that had begun to form between them. They were both grappling with the expectations of their worlds. He, with the weight of his status and reputation, and she, with the burdens of judgment and self-acceptance. In that moment, they connected on a deeper level, their shared struggles weaving an invisible thread between their souls. Oliver spoke of the pressure he felt to maintain a certain image, the loneliness that accompanied his wealth, and the way he longed for genuine connection. Eleanor listened intently, her heart swelling with empathy, recognizing the parallels in their lives. As they shared their fears and dreams under the stars, laughter bubbled up between them once more, a sound that felt light and free. It was a contrast to the heaviness of the evening, an affirmation that perhaps in their shared vulnerabilities, they could find solace and strength together. Eleanor realized that with Oliver, she didn't have to hide. There was no judgment, no superficial expectations, just an authentic connection that felt like a breath of fresh air. The world around them faded, the mansion and its occupants becoming a distant memory as they became lost in one another's company. In that moment, Eleanor felt seen and valued, not for her appearance or her background, but for who she was at her core. And for Oliver, he felt a sense of liberation, breaking free from the gilded cage of societal expectations that had long confined him. As they stood together, the cool breeze wrapping around them, Eleanor found a flicker of hope igniting within her. Perhaps this night, with all its chaos and judgment, could lead to something beautiful, a bond forged through honesty and acceptance, a chance to redefine their places in a world that often overlooked the importance of depth over appearance. Together, they began to navigate the complexities of their lives, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, united by their newfound connection in a world that often felt isolating. Inside the lavish dining room, the atmosphere crackled with tension. Victoria, an impeccably dressed woman with perfectly coiffed hair and a piercing gaze, had cornered Oliver. The opulent chandeliers above cast a warm glow on the golden table settings, but their light did little to soften the chill in her voice. She stood with her arms crossed, a picture of disapproval, her designer dress hugging her figure like a second skin. Guests milled about, their laughter and chatter fading into a backdrop of unease as Victoria's confrontation escalated. Oliver's brow furrowed, his typically composed demeanor faltering under her scrutiny. He could feel the weight of the room's collective gaze shifting toward them, the whispers fluttering like leaves in the wind. As Victoria chastised him for inviting Eleanor, her words dripped with disdain. To her, this was not merely a dinner. It was a stage where appearances mattered far more than authenticity. She posited that Oliver's decision to include Eleanor tarnished his reputation, that his elite friends could not comprehend why he would associate with someone so different from them. Eleanor, standing just beyond the doorway, had unknowingly become the center of this storm. Her heart raced as she listened, the warmth of the room feeling distant and cold. The opulence around her now felt suffocating, a stark contrast to the openness she had shared with Oliver just moments before. The laughter of the other guests turned hollow, the clinking of glasses a mere reminder of the judgment lurking just beneath the surface. She wanted to retreat, to vanish into the shadows of the grand mansion, but something kept her rooted in place. As Victoria's accusations continued, Oliver's voice rose above the din, firm and resolute. He defended Eleanor with a passion that surprised even him. He spoke of authenticity, of the need to embrace individuals for who they truly were rather than the facades they presented. Each word was a shield he raised against the barbs of social expectation. He called out the shallow nature of his circle, the hypocrisy that dictated their interactions. Even as he stood tall, Eleanor felt a pang of humiliation wash over her. The notion that she was a source of embarrassment for him stung sharply. Looking around the room, Eleanor saw the glances exchanged among the guests. Some wore expressions of shock, while others seemed to relish the drama unfolding before them. The cliques that had formed throughout the evening whispered behind their hands, their eyes darting between Oliver and the woman who had dared to defy the rules of their social hierarchy. Eleanor's heart sank. She had come to this dinner seeking connection, and instead, she felt like a pariah. Just as she contemplated slipping away, Oliver's gaze found hers across the room. His eyes, usually so guarded, now radiated warmth and determination. He nodded subtly, as if to reassure her that she was not alone. It was a small gesture, but it ignited a flicker of hope within her. She straightened her posture, refusing to let Victoria's words define her worth. Oliver's unwavering support became a lifeline, reminding her of the strength they had begun to forge together. But as the confrontation continued, the tension in the air thickened. Victoria, undeterred by Oliver's defense, pressed on, her voice rising with indignation. She was relentless, intent on proving her point, and the guests began to shift uncomfortably, caught between loyalty to Oliver and the ingrained prejudices they shared with Victoria. Eleanor felt the oppressive weight of their judgment, a storm brewing within the confines of the elegant mansion. Outside, the world transformed as snow began to fall steadily, blanketing the landscape in white. The first flurries danced gracefully in the air, oblivious to the turmoil inside. The snowstorm, which would soon trap everyone in the mansion, served as a reminder of the unpredictability of life. Inside, however, the warmth of the holiday spirit was quickly fading, overshadowed by Victoria's relentless attack. As the confrontation reached a fever pitch, Eleanor felt a surge of resilience. She had spent so long internalizing the judgments of others, but now, standing in the midst of this chaos, she realized she could no longer allow herself to be defined by their perceptions. She was more than her size, more than the whispers that followed her. She was Eleanor Finch, a woman with dreams, passions, and a heart that had fought through the darkness of isolation. With Oliver standing firm against Victoria, the tide of the evening began to shift. The snow continued to fall, swirling in the wind as if reflecting the tumultuous emotions brewing within the mansion. Guests began to murmur among themselves, the tension palpable. Some expressed concern for Oliver, while others exchanged glances that spoke volumes about their discomfort with the confrontation. Yet, no one dared to speak up, caught in the web of social etiquette that had long dictated their interactions. In that moment, Eleanor decided she would no longer remain a passive player in this unfolding drama. She stepped forward, her heart pounding in her chest, determination fueling her every movement. The guests turned to watch her, their faces a mixture of curiosity and disbelief. She could feel the weight of their gazes, but she pressed on, the warmth of Oliver's support guiding her. As Eleanor approached, Oliver's expression shifted from one of concern to surprise, and then to pride. She stood beside him, her presence a silent declaration of solidarity. The room fell silent, the air electric with anticipation. Eleanor's voice, though soft at first, grew steady as she addressed the gathering. She spoke not only to Victoria but to everyone present, sharing her truth. She recounted her struggles with self-acceptance, the relentless judgment she had faced throughout her life, and the isolation that had haunted her for so long. With each word, she peeled back the layers of her heart, revealing the vulnerability that lay beneath. She spoke of the beauty of authenticity, of the importance of embracing others for who they truly were, and the joy that could come from genuine connections. The atmosphere shifted, the guests captivated by the raw honesty in her voice. The laughter that had once echoed through the room now seemed distant, replaced by a collective introspection. Eleanor's courage ignited something within them, prompting reflections on their own behaviors and beliefs. Perhaps, they thought, they had been too quick to judge, too caught up in the superficial. As the snow continued to fall outside, the sense of confinement within the mansion morphed into a shared experience. The storm, once seen as an inconvenience, now felt like a catalyst for change. With each heartbeat, Eleanor felt the walls of judgment begin to crumble, replaced by a burgeoning sense of understanding. She could see it in the eyes of the guests. A flicker of empathy had begun to emerge amidst the tension. But just as hope seemed to blossom, the night took an unexpected turn. The howling wind outside intensified, battering against the windows, echoing the storm of emotions swirling within. The guests, now trapped in the mansion, felt the weight of their choices pressed down upon them. There was no escape, no turning back. They were forced to confront not only the dynamics of the evening, but also their own biases and insecurities. Inside the grand dining room, the atmosphere crackled with a mix of anxiety and anticipation. As Eleanor stood beside Oliver, their bond solidified in the face of adversity. She realized that this night, for all its turmoil, was a turning point. The snowstorm, which had initially seemed like a burden, was transforming into an opportunity for connection and understanding. As the evening unfolded and the storm raged outside, the guests would have to reckon with their own truths and the authenticity that Eleanor had bravely brought to the forefront. The mansion, once a symbol of opulence and exclusivity, had become a crucible of transformation, where the true meaning of acceptance and love would soon be tested in ways none of them could have anticipated. The snowstorm howled outside, swirling around the grand mansion like a tempest of discontent, but inside, the atmosphere shifted as the guests reluctantly turned their attention to the impromptu games. With the power cut and the flickering candlelight casting dancing shadows on the walls, the mood was tense yet ripe for something unexpected. Eleanor Finch, who had felt so out of place just hours before, found herself at the center of the gathering, her laughter echoing off the opulent decor. Eleanor had always possessed a spark, a unique charm that lay beneath her layers of self-doubt. As she effortlessly navigated the games, her wit began to shine through the initial awkwardness of the evening. She recounted amusing anecdotes of her childhood, tales of family gatherings marred by the absurdity of holiday traditions gone awry. The guests, initially skeptical, began to lean in, laughter bubbling up from their throats, breaking the ice that had formed between them and the unassuming woman who had dared to disrupt their orderly lives. The first game, a trivia contest, saw Eleanor catching the attention of the guests with her sharp memory and surprising knowledge of obscure facts. She knew the names of obscure Christmas songs, the history behind the holiday's many traditions, and even the odd trivia about the city's elite that made the others gasp in shock. They were used to being the center of attention, used to being the ones who knew everything. But here was Eleanor, a woman they had dismissed as unworthy, who was not only keeping up but surpassing them. As the games continued, Eleanor's confidence blossomed. She felt a thrill in their laughter, a warmth in their acceptance. The glances that had once been filled with judgment transformed into looks of curiosity and even admiration. It was a sweet victory, and for the first time that evening, she felt like she truly belonged. Yet, lurking in the background was Victoria, her expression a mixture of disdain and determination. The childhood friend of Oliver, Victoria had spent the evening plotting her next move, her bitterness simmering beneath the surface like a pot on the verge of boiling over. In a corner of the room, Oliver Hastings watched Eleanor with a blend of pride and wonder. He had invited her into his world, and now she was not just surviving but thriving amid the very people who had dismissed her. The admiration he felt for her resilience was palpable. He could see the way her laughter drew others in, how her presence softened the sharp edges of the elite crowd. With each passing moment, he felt the walls around his heart begin to crack, the deep loneliness that had filled his life for so long beginning to dissipate in the warmth of her authenticity. As the games wound down, Oliver took Eleanor's hand, leading her to the library, a quiet retreat from the chaos of the evening. The dimly lit room, lined with books that held the wisdom of ages, felt like a sanctuary away from the judgmental gazes of the guests. Here, they were free to be themselves without the weight of societal expectations pressing down on them. The air was thick with unspoken words, a connection that had been building all evening. Oliver shared his fears, the loneliness that had permeated his life despite the wealth and success that surrounded him. He spoke of the countless gatherings he had attended, the hollow conversations that felt more like performances than genuine interactions. Eleanor listened intently, her heart aching for the man who had offered her a chance when no one else would. She understood his pain, the weight of judgment that both of them had faced in their lives. The two of them were kindred spirits, bound by their shared experiences of isolation and the longing for acceptance. In that moment, surrounded by the comforting embrace of the library, they shared stories, their laughter mingling with the crackling of a nearby fireplace. Oliver reached out, brushing a strand of hair behind Eleanor's ear, his fingers lingering against her skin. She felt a rush of warmth spread through her, a sense of safety and belonging that she had never fully experienced before. Their eyes locked, and in that gaze, they found solace, a promise that they would no longer have to face the world alone. Meanwhile, Victoria was not idle. The seeds of doubt had begun to sprout in her mind, and she recognized that Eleanor's charm could potentially overshadow her own. She watched as the two shared their intimate moment, a bitter knot forming in her stomach. Determined to regain control of the evening, she concocted a plan, her mind racing with ways to undermine Eleanor's newfound position. She would plant a rumor, one that could poison the atmosphere and turn the guests against the very woman who had so effortlessly won their favor. Victoria approached a small group gathered near the fireplace, feigning casual interest but with a calculating glint in her eye. With a subtle shift in her tone, she began to weave a narrative, a whisper that would echo through the evening. She insinuated that Eleanor was not there for friendship or acceptance, but rather for the wealth and status that came with being associated with Oliver. Her words dripped with disdain, painting Eleanor as a gold digger rather than the genuine person she had come to be seen as. The guests, who had just begun to warm to Eleanor, hesitated, their expressions shifting from amusement to suspicion. Victoria's calculated approach struck a chord, and soon murmurs of doubt began to ripple through the crowd. The laughter that had once filled the room was stifled, replaced by a tension that mirrored the storm raging outside. It was the same tension that Eleanor had felt upon her arrival, a reminder of the judgment that lingered just beneath the surface. As the rumor spread, Eleanor remained blissfully unaware of the storm brewing just outside the library door. She and Oliver were lost in their own world, sharing stories of dreams and aspirations, their hopes entwined like ivy climbing a trellis. But even in that moment of intimacy, the shadows of Victoria's words loomed large, threatening to cast a pall over the evening. Unbeknownst to Eleanor, the atmosphere was shifting, the acceptance she had fought so hard to earn hanging by a thread. Oliver, sensing the change, felt an unease settle in his chest. He had fought against the tide of judgment his entire life, and now, standing beside Eleanor, he was determined to protect her from the very prejudice he had long battled himself. His heart raced, not just from the fear of losing the connection they had forged, but from the realization that he would stand by her side, no matter what the cost. As Victoria's whispers took hold, the tension in the air became palpable. The laughter that once filled the mansion faded into an uneasy silence, leaving only the crackling of the fireplace to fill the void. Eleanor, still basking in the glow of their conversation, remained blissfully unaware of the chaos that was brewing just beyond the door. Oliver, however, could sense the shift, the way the room seemed to constrict around them, threatening to engulf their moment in a tide of hostility. He knew he had to act before the darkness took hold completely. The weight of the evening rested heavy on his shoulders, but he was prepared to face it. He would not let Eleanor become a casualty of the prejudice he had tried so hard to escape. With resolve in his heart, he steeled himself to confront the swirling rumors, ready to defend the woman who had brought light into his otherwise lonely existence. The night hung in the balance, the promise of acceptance and love teetering on the edge of a precipice, as the storm outside raged, threatening to mirror the turmoil within. As the evening continued to unfold, Eleanor Finch found herself standing near the grand dining table, a lavish display of culinary artistry that had once made her stomach churn with envy. The twinkling lights of the chandelier above cast a warm glow on the polished silverware and crystal goblets, but the atmosphere was thick with tension. The whispers and giggles of Oliver Hastings' elite guests echoed in her mind, a dissonant contrast to the sumptuous feast laid out before them. Eleanor had always been acutely aware of the judgments cast upon her due to her size, yet tonight she felt an ember of determination stirring within her. The moment had come. With a deep breath, she straightened her posture, feeling Oliver's unwavering gaze upon her from across the room. He stood tall, a pillar of support, his eyes encouraging her to speak up. Eleanor's heart raced as she cleared her throat, the previously murmured conversations around her fading into a hush. "Why is it," she began, her voice steady despite the fluttering in her chest, "that we gather here? surrounded by opulence. Yet so many of us choose to wear masks instead of being true to ourselves. The room shifted, guests exchanging glances, each one grappling with the unexpected confrontation. Eleanor could see the discomfort etched on their faces, the denial bubbling beneath the surface. She pressed on, her voice gaining strength. You talk about beauty, about success, about the image you portray to the world, yet it's all so shallow. I may not fit your narrow definition of perfection, but I am here, and I deserve to be treated with respect. With each word, a ripple of realization seemed to wash over the guests. The laughter and snide remarks that had once enveloped her began to fade, replaced by the weight of her honesty. Eleanor continued, drawing from the depths of her experiences, each story a thread binding her to the moment. She spoke of the loneliness that had shadowed her life, of the times she had been judged by her appearance, of being overlooked and underestimated. She spoke about the courage it took to step into this room, to accept Oliver's invitation against a backdrop of self-doubt, and the importance of embracing authenticity over superficiality. In that moment, Oliver stepped closer, a silent testament to his unwavering support. He stood beside her, a strong presence that contrasted the vulnerability she felt, his expression one of admiration and pride. It was a powerful moment of unity between them, two souls connecting in a world that often sought to divide them. He offered a nod, a silent affirmation that her words were not just heard but felt deeply by him. As Eleanor's voice echoed through the opulent hall, a few guests shifted uncomfortably, their expressions softening as they began to reflect on their own behaviors. The air was charged with an electric mix of embarrassment and contemplation. Some guests exchanged furtive apologies, their whispers barely audible. I didn't mean. I was wrong too. The murmurs floated through the air, a collective reckoning of sorts, but not all were willing to face the truth. Victoria, still harboring a fierce bitterness, crossed her arms defiantly, her expression a mask of disdain. The glimmer of malice in her eyes betrayed her desire to undermine everything Eleanor had just built. She stood as a stark reminder that not everyone was ready to embrace change, and her presence loomed like a storm cloud over the newfound camaraderie. Eleanor caught a glimpse of Victoria's disdain and felt a surge of defiance. Eleanor wasn't just standing up for herself. She was standing up for all the women who had ever felt less than worthy, all the people who had been judged by their appearances. The moment was crucial, and she refused to let Victoria's negativity overshadow it. In the growing silence, a knock on the door shattered the tense atmosphere. It was unexpected, almost jarring, and immediately drew everyone's attention. The grand entrance opened slowly, revealing a police officer, his presence commanding and serious. The festive decor and laughter faded into a distant memory as all eyes turned towards him, curiosity mingling with apprehension. "Is Mr. Hastings present?" the officer inquired, his voice firm yet calm. Oliver stepped forward, his brow furrowing in confusion. The guests exchanged nervous glances, whispers of concern rippling through the crowd. The officer continued, his demeanor grave. "We received an anonymous tip regarding illegal activities connected to this gathering. I need to speak with Victoria Lawson." The room fell into a stunned silence, the gravity of the situation sinking in. Eleanor's heart raced anew, but this time, the flutter was mixed with a sense of anticipation. Victoria's expression flipped from contempt to incredulity in an instant, her eyes widening in disbelief as the officer's words pierced through the remnants of her smug demeanor. Oliver glanced at Eleanor, a mix of emotions flickering across his face as he processed the unfolding scenario. Eleanor felt a strange sense of triumph swell within her. The very person who had sought to belittle her was now under scrutiny. The tables had turned in a way she had never expected, and the irony of the situation was almost poetic. "Victoria, would you please step forward?" the officer requested, his voice steady. Victoria hesitated, the bravado she had clung to slipping away like sand through her fingers. As she approached the officer, the air in the room felt thick with tension, the other guests watching with bated breath. Eleanor could see the smug confidence evaporating from Victoria's expression, replaced by a palpable sense of dread. The officer explained that they had received information about fraudulent schemes tied to Victoria, a web of deceit that had exploited the trust of wealthy friends. The implications were serious, and the shock of the revelation rippled through the room like a shockwave. Eleanor's heart raced as she absorbed the full weight of the moment, her earlier courage now tinged with a sense of vindication. Victoria, once the queen bee of the evening, now stood vulnerable and exposed. The guests who had once looked up to her now regarded her with pity and disbelief. Eleanor felt a flicker of satisfaction at the thought that perhaps, in this moment, the true nature of individuals had been revealed, and the judgment that had once been directed at her had turned back on the very person who had perpetuated it. As the officer prepared to escort Victoria away, Eleanor caught Oliver's eye once more, and in that shared glance, they both understood the gravity of the transformation that had taken place that night. The extravagant facade of their social circle was crumbling, revealing the raw vulnerability beneath. Eleanor had ventured bravely into a realm of judgment and prejudice, and in doing so, she had not only found her voice but had also ignited a change in those around her. The Christmas dinner had evolved from a superficial gathering into a moment of reckoning, a testament to the power of authenticity and acceptance. The journey was far from over, but in that instant, Eleanor felt a newfound strength. She had stood her ground, and the world around her was beginning to shift. The evening had transformed into something entirely unexpected, and as the door closed behind Victoria and the police officer, Eleanor couldn't help but smile. Perhaps this holiday season would be one of true connection, where the bonds forged in honesty would shine brighter than any superficial charm. The night was still young, and the possibilities ahead were limitless. The tension in the grand dining room was palpable as the police officer, a sturdy figure in a crisp uniform, stepped into the opulent space. His presence cut through the remnants of the earlier chaos, commanding attention from all corners. Eleanor stood frozen, her heart racing, not only from the events that had just transpired, but also from the sudden shift in the room's energy. As the officer cleared his throat, the guests turned their attention to him, their expressions a mix of confusion and concern. The officer wasted no time. With a steady voice, he began outlining the reasons for his presence. He explained that an anonymous tip had led to an investigation into Victoria's activities, specifically, her involvement in fraudulent schemes that targeted wealthy acquaintances. Gasps rippled through the crowd, and the whispers of disbelief grew louder. Eleanor's heart sank as the weight of the revelation settled in. She had sensed an undercurrent of malice in Victoria's behavior, but to hear it confirmed was jarring. The officer continued, detailing how Victoria had manipulated those around her, using their trust to siphon money and resources under the guise of friendship. As he spoke, Eleanor caught a glimpse of Oliver's face. His expression was a mixture of disappointment and shock, but also a hint of relief. In that moment, he seemed to shed a layer of the burden he had carried throughout the evening. The facade of his elite social circle was unraveling, exposing the greed and superficiality that had lingered beneath the surface. Eleanor could see it in the eyes of the other guests. They were beginning to understand the depth of their own complicity, their own blindness to Victoria's true nature. When the officer motioned for Victoria to step forward, a tense silence enveloped the room. The once vibrant woman who had ruled the evening with her sharp tongue and cutting remarks stood deflated. The realization of her impending exposure and the loss of her social standing washed over her like a tidal wave. As the officer placed handcuffs on her wrists, Eleanor felt a mixture of triumph and sadness. The confrontation had stripped away the facade, but it also highlighted the vulnerability that lay beneath the surface of every person in the room. With Victoria's removal, the atmosphere shifted. The grand dining room, once a stage for opulence and pretense, began to breathe again. Conversations that had been stilted and superficial transformed into genuine exchanges. Guests began to acknowledge their previous behavior, their eyes softening as they turned toward Eleanor and Oliver, seeking connection rather than judgment. Apologies floated through the air like confetti, each one more sincere than the last. They spoke of their misguided perceptions, of how they had allowed themselves to be swayed by appearances and societal expectations. Eleanor felt a warmth envelop her, a sense of acceptance that had eluded her for so long. One by one, the guests approached Eleanor, their expressions shifting from skepticism to admiration. They began to share their own stories of struggle, of feeling out of place, of battling insecurities and societal pressures. Each confession added a layer to the fragile tapestry of camaraderie that was forming. Eleanor listened intently, her heart swelling with a sense of belonging that had been absent for years. For every apology she received, she offered forgiveness, extending her hand to those who had once judged her harshly. Oliver stood beside her, a pillar of support amidst the shifting dynamics. He watched as Eleanor transformed, her confidence blossoming in the wake of Victoria's downfall. The connection they had forged earlier in the evening deepened, as if the shared weight of judgment had been lifted, leaving space for something beautiful to emerge. He marveled at how the woman he had invited to his home, the one who had been the subject of whispers, was now the epicenter of change in the room. Her authenticity had sparked a revelation in others, illuminating the importance of embracing one's true self. As the evening wore on, laughter began to echo through the mansion. Guests who had once clung to their pretentious personas now found joy in vulnerability, engaging in games and conversations that felt genuine. The atmosphere was charged with a newfound energy, the kind that only arises when people shed their masks and allow themselves to be seen. Eleanor reveled in the moment, her laughter ringing out as she interacted with those around her. She had never felt so alive, so accepted, and it was all thanks to Oliver's courageous decision to invite her into his world. Amidst the laughter and the unfolding camaraderie, Eleanor and Oliver found themselves gravitating toward each other. The world around them faded as they exchanged glances filled with unspoken understanding. The bond they had formed, fortified by shared experiences of judgment and loneliness, felt unbreakable. In that moment, under the soft glow of the chandelier, Eleanor realized that she was not just a guest in this world. She belonged here. As the festivities continued, the guests began to gather around the mistletoe that hung in the doorway, a whimsical reminder of the season's spirit. Laughter and shouts of playful encouragement filled the air, and Eleanor felt her heart race as she caught Oliver's eye. There was something electric between them, a magnetic pull that drew them closer together. In a moment that felt suspended in time, they moved toward each other, the chaos of the evening fading into the background. Under the mistletoe, surrounded by newfound friends and the spirit of acceptance, Oliver leaned in, capturing Eleanor's lips in a passionate kiss. It was a kiss that held promises of understanding, of shared laughter, and of a love that transcended societal norms. Eleanor melted into the moment, feeling the warmth of Oliver's embrace solidify her worth in a way she had never imagined. The kiss was not just an expression of romance. It was a celebration of everything they had overcome together. As they pulled away, their eyes locked, and a sense of completeness washed over them. For the first time, Oliver felt free from the chains of expectation that had bound him for so long. He was no longer just a wealthy businessman. He was a man in love, willing to embrace the beauty of authenticity. Eleanor, too, felt transformed. The insecurities that had once plagued her began to fade, replaced by a sense of empowerment and self-love that radiated from within. The guests around them erupted in cheers, their acceptance of the moment a testament to the evening's transformation. What had started as a holiday gathering filled with judgment had evolved into a celebration of love, acceptance, and genuine connection. Eleanor realized that she was no longer defined by her appearance or the opinions of others. She was a woman worthy of love and respect. As the night drew to a close, Eleanor and Oliver stood together, hand in hand, gazing at the twinkling lights that adorned the mansion. They had faced adversity, judgment, and prejudice. Yet they emerged stronger, their bond unbreakable. The evening had become a turning point, a catalyst for change that would ripple through their lives and the lives of those around them. In each other, they had found not just love, but a shared understanding of acceptance that would guide them into the future. With their hearts full and their spirits high, Eleanor and Oliver stepped into the world together, ready to embrace whatever came next. The night had transformed them, and as they left the mansion behind, they knew they would never look back.